is such a thing as a living evil. A dark and shapeless thing that lives not in the spaces that we know, but between them. In the dark. In the night. Now listen carefully because there isn't much time. Listen and believe. Because it's all true.
Where's Brucey?
On the ladder.
Hi, John. Bruce is right there by the camera.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming close to the star of our film, Bruce Campbell.
We wanted to do Army of Darkness as the second Evil Dead. We wanted to have it be called, Medieval Dead. Because at the end of Evil Dead 2, he lands and he's in a strange land, and so that's where Army of Darkness picks up. But we wanted part 2 to be that. Didn't work out, it seemed too expensive at the time. And so it took a few more years for that to gestate into, being possible that we could actually make Army of Darkness or Medieval Dead.
Who's with me?
Well, I know with the Evil Dead movies, they always sold well overseas. So Evil Dead 2 presumably did well also. And so I think it just allowed, the air was right. Sam did his first studio movie, which was Darkman. I think it was their 5th highest grossing movie. It didn't cost a whole lot, and it did okay as like a classic, B movie, action movie. And so he got his taste of the studio. That was Universal. So Universal basically partnered up with Dino De Laurentiis to make this movie because Dino wanted the foreign, and he had the rights because of making Evil Dead 2. They combined put up, I think, $11 million some odd for that movie. Cracks me up to this day. Because the character Ash is so not the right guy. He's not a Navy SEAL. He works at S-Mart. He has no skills, and he's cocky, and he makes horrible mistakes. And this is the guy that you're spending $11 million on.
What makes Bruce Campbell great as Ash and as a great performer? He is the best, hands down, backwards actor in the world. He can perform backwards anything, and it's truly brilliant. And also, Bruce is up for anything.
And this was me, probably physically, the best I'm gonna be. Physically being able to do whatever I'm able to do. So I think I wound up being overtrained. I learned how to ride a horse, not well. I finally did a series, The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., a year later. Then I learned how to ride a horse. Army of Darkness, I was thankful that there was a cape going off the back of me because it disguised the air between my ass and the saddle. Because, there was I was not riding that horse well. I was not sitting that horse. It was the ass saddle battle is what they called it. So I got thrown when we were rehearsing, when I was practicing in a ring. The horse threw me off one time. And it sucks getting thrown off a horse.
He had so much to do, being the evil Ash, and being good Ash, and being the little Ashes. It's one thing after another, and the guy just works. He's a workhorse, and he's the right guy for those movies, and he makes Ash lovable, and Ash comical, and vulnerable, and heroic, and all the things that Ash is, and that's all Bruce Campbell.
Your shoelace is untied.
Most actors do not have to do that much technically. These poor English actors are used to drawing room comedies and whatever with having tea and doing Shakespeare. So they learned a whole new craft on this one, for sure.
For that arrogance, I shall see you dead.
I'd always been quite physical, and I'd been lucky enough to shoot quite a few films where I'd had to ride horses, and You know, there was a time when, for want of a better phrase, I was a romantic hero, so I always got to ride the big black stallion, carry the big sword. And there was drama school, there was certificates for fight. I'd done a lot of it before, so for me that was just a joy.
Marcus Gilbert was great because he, you know, we needed someone who could be a king. He had to have a kingly stature.
There is an evil awakened in this land. And while my people fight for their very souls against it, you, Henry the Red, wage war on us.
Marcus and I are still friends. We hung out, and we still had the competition thing going. It fed out of the movie and into our real lives. We started competing with drinking games, you know, and Marcus could drink me under the table, but we'd drink together. Or we'd go running, and he'd have to run faster than me, or he'd have to be stronger.
Richard had an encyclopedic knowledge of books. He was a sort of, I wouldn't say he was a tortured poet, but he was, yeah, intellectually he was to be admired.
Richard was just a great, bigger than life character. When he walked in the room, he seemed like that guy. Some actors you have to create, you have to put a costume on them and shoulder padding and put lots of makeup and hair pieces, and then they become that person. He just sort of came in. He was like, I'm Richard Grove. We're like, of course you are.
I was absolute nuts for Evil Dead. First time I saw it, it just knocked me out of my chair. I auditioned, I was so excited. I was just hoping, I gotta get in this film, I gotta get in this film. And sure enough, they cast me. And I was so excited about it. I couldn't wait to work with Sam.
Thank you, generous host!
Timothy Quill, Tim is funny. You know, Tim was in all of our Super 8 movies in high school. Tim was a swimmer. He was always ripped. He was the handsome one. He always played the bad guys. But Tim was really funny too.
I moved out to California, and Sam gave me my first shot. He goes, Timmy, come on by the studio. They happen to be casting.
Comes into the office and he goes, look, I'm still in shape. Takes his, took his shirt off and he's got these pretty good guns and he goes, and I'm a swimmer. I've shaved my head multiple times. I'll shave my head. So we're like, shit, okay, Tim's in the movie.
And I'm going, Sam, I would shave my whole body. And Sam hired me as the blacksmith. And out of the 100 days of shooting, I gotta believe he had me there most of those. He was very, very kind to me. And ever since, been very loyal. And that's when we got back together and I got my SAG card and moved to Hollywood.
Dung-eating fool! Thou hast doomed us all! When thou misspoke the words, the army of the dead awoke.
Ian Abercrombie was great. I think he was just sort of amused by all of what was happening. This was all pretty ridiculous to him. You know, these are all English actors. They've all done Shakespeare, and now there's skeletons going, I don't think he knew what was happening, but he had a great sense of humor and was a very good sport about the whole thing.
What of all the sweet words that you spoke in private?
Oh, well, that's just what we call pillow talk, baby.
Well, Embeth was clearly the finest actress of the bunch. But, when you go to show the big producer, Dino De Laurentiis, your screen test, you can't just give him one actor. They hate that. They're like, what are my choices? We sifted through lots of these people. So we had this one chick who had the big boobs and the thing, and she said her lines like that. And she was just, it wasn't happening, but we had to present somebody else with it. So Dino was favoring her. And we're like, no, Dino, please. Embeth she was a woman. When these auditions happened, when she came on, you were like, dork. Every word out of her mouth she believed.
'Tis said that thou wilt journey for the book to help us, and that thou wilt lead our people against the evil.
But she was a hard sell because she didn't have that wah, 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 wah. Don't forget, Dino De Laurentiis, lest we forget, was married to, various Italian actresses of great shape and quantity. And so I think, Dino wanted something he could, have something to look at. I don't know. I'm not Dino. But we had to do a second screen test, I think, with her and gussy her up and, put a corset on and shove anything that she had up into sight and, really do her over. And then finally he shut up about it. It was a fight.
There's this very, very beautiful and a proper British actress who is thrown into the world of Sam Raimi with craziness and.
Give me some sugar, baby.
And her role wasn't particularly built up really well. She was a sort of romantic foil for Ash, but she played everything to the hilt. I mean, she was totally focused on what she was doing, even on the small moments.
With Embeth, I think working with us, it was all new. Once we got on set, it was like, okay, you're in a makeup and you're in contact lenses and you're on a horse and you're following this guy and it's the middle of the night. And I think once all the layers started getting piled on, my personal opinion was, I think she had a point where she was questioning possibly whether she wanted to act as a future, if this was the right idea for a career choice. Maybe there's something better out there.
The whole shoot, we were just talking about the industry and the business. He was wondering about this, wondering about that, and then she goes on to Schindler's List. See, we train him. You train him in the B movies, then you send him along.
They offered me the chance to lead them, to teach them, to be king.
Uh-huh. There's three things that have to be in a Sam Raimi film for it to be a Sam Raimi film. One is Bruce Campbell. The other one is Sam's car, always in every movie. And of course, the most important ingredient is his brother, Ted Raimi.
In Army of Darkness, I think I played 4 parts from what I remember. The S-Mart stock boy. I'm on the wall fighting Deadites with Marcus Gelbert.
We can't hold the battlements! We will hold! We must protect the book!
Then I am frightened lieutenant, screaming that I wanted to run, just a wimp.
We should leave this place as soon as possible. We can be safe in the hills. Use the mountains. We must flee.
Ted Raimi was the biggest coward in the history.
I'm afraid. This one of us owns. Everybody die!
Well, 2 seconds later, I'm doing the scene. I'll stand by ya. And then you can see Ted Raimi.
You can count on my steel.
Sam goes, cut, cut, cut. He goes, Ted, wait a minute, Ted, my brother. You were the biggest coward 2 seconds ago. So he sent him back into makeup and wardrobe, and he became one of his 4 characters he played on Army of Darkness.
He did tons of voices in post-production for skeletons and things like that.
Let's get the hell out of here!
So Ted was all over the movie like a cheap suit.
Also working on the film on Army of Darkness, what's kind of cool is there's a lot of genre people came through that movie and were on that movie. And I remember sitting in a bus with a bunch of Deadites, and we were driving out to the location at night, and sitting across from me was Bill Moseley. I remember looking over and going, it's Bill Moseley, it's Chop Top.
I saw Evil Dead 2 and I thought it was like the greatest movie I'd ever seen. I was so excited about it. I thought the camera work was amazing, the editing, the sound effects, and I thought Bruce Campbell's acting was just incredible. And I made a scorpion vow. I'm a Scorpio, I don't even know what a scorpion vow is, but I made a scorpion vow that I was going to be in the next Evil Dead movie. What I did was I sent a letter to Sam. I think Renaissance Pictures had a bungalow at Universal or something, and I think Sam was maybe at the time working on Darkman. But I sent a letter and said, look, I'm a big fan. I was Chop Top in Chainsaw 2, and I would love to work with you. And Sam wrote back, and he said, it's great, I love Chop Top. And so we had like a little mutual admiration going on. So I came in and I auditioned for the part of the new captain of the Army of the Dead. For my audition, I think they wanted to know if I could do an English accent or something. So I think I declaimed the Jabberwocky. That was my audition for them. 'Twas brillig in the slithy toves, did gyre and gimble in the wabe. Okay. So I got the gig.
We've secured the courtyard, my lord. Excellent.
That was very exciting for me, because I'm a big horror fan, so to be a part of Evil Dead 3, Army of Darkness, was really just a dream come true.
Shop smart, shop S-smart.
I had a wonderful girlfriend, Linda.
Bridget Fonda, it turns out she was just a fan of the movies. And you get that sometimes. You just get a call from someone's agent, goes, hey, big fan, just, if there's anything going on with these movies, let so-and-so know. Sam's like, hey, we need a Linda. And he explained to her, you don't really do that much. You're at S-Mart, which some footage was cut out. We shot more with her at S-Mart, me trying to woo her. But she didn't care what it was. So she's in the movie for like 2 shots. Bridget Fonda. But of all the 3 movies, there's 3 different Lindas, so it doesn't matter. It's okay. It'll be Angelina Jolie for the next one. The first Evil Dead, we were just trying to make a movie. The second Evil Dead, I think we were tired of the melodrama, and it was co-written by Scott Spiegel, who was a huge Three Stooges fan, so was Sam Raimi. You combine those two guys, you're gonna get eyes poked. So Army of Darkness was really, it just took it to the next level. Definitely a departure. It's more of like a Ray Harryhausen movie. It's Jason and the Argonauts. Sam and I both watched that movie, you know, in the library of West Maple Junior High School. Sam was a year behind me, but we would have these screenings in classrooms, and they'd open up the dividers and show movies for whatever dumb reason. And one of them, I think, was Jason and the Argonauts. So we were both impressed with it. The animated skeletons. It was really something you had never really seen before, that type of stuff.
When Bob Kurtzman, Greg Nicotero, and myself got hired for Evil Dead 2, Mark Shostrom hired us. That was his show, Mark Shostrom. And the three of us were hired, and it was a great experience.
We, of course, were like loving it because it was one of our favorite film projects to ever work on, not just as a classic kind of genre picture, but as an experience.
And it really was a great opportunity because we had realized that each one of us brought a different skill set. You know, Howard was sort of the on-the-floor kind of shop manager type of guy. Bob was really the sort of creative guy, and I was the business guy who had a sense of running the company. So we complemented each other, and it made complete sense. So K&B really came out of that realization that the three of us seemed to make a really good group.
When Army of Darkness came up, Rod Tappert and Sam Raimi said, hey, let's call the guys, you know?
The movie was a very heavy physical effects movie in terms of creature creation and just the time period, the medieval time period, from wardrobe and props, etc. So as I recall, it's a very long pre-production period.
For us, it was one of those dream projects because Sam at that point had become a very, very sought-after director, and you knew going into it that he would use every trick in the book. Sam was never shy about using puppets, about using makeups, about using miniatures. I mean, in Evil Dead 2, we had stop motion animation, for crying out loud. So it was really exciting to be able to work with a guy that imaginative and knowing that everything was going to be on the table. So for us, it was a big project. And given that K&B had been around for just a few years, it was also a good opportunity for us as a calling card to get people to notice our company, because up to that point we had done, you know, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 and Tales from the Dark Side and Halloween 5 and Dances with Wolves. We'd done, like, our movies were kind of all over the place because we were really kind of laying the groundwork for K&B.
It ends up the show's being split between us and Tony Gardner's company, Alterian. And I would say that Alterian probably ended up doing maybe 30%, and then we did the rest. Because we did all the deadites, tons of makeups. I mean, we were slammed. Tony's company was responsible for Evil Ash and Evil Sheila.
From Ash's facial scars when he's normal all the way through to Evil Ash at the end, and then turning into a skeleton and all that stuff. There was really a lot more than we had in Darkman.
I remember one of the first things that we did was we built little maquettes of the skeleton soldiers, and we bought some skeleton model kits and we built them and we dressed them and we made armor, and we built a little set, and I put a mirror up and a little smoke machine and took pictures of it to make it look like there was a lot more than there really was, and we sent the pictures to Sam like, here's a sort of a proof of concept. We were really, really excited. You know, I did a bunch of pre-production concept art, and we had a whole team of people drawing, trying to get sort of Sam excited and interested.
Here on the set of Evil Dead 3, you really never know who's going to come up and stab you in the back.
We were shooting 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We were so exhausted. We were making no money at all. Again, I think like Bob and I think each made like $800 a week. And it was ridiculous. I wish I was union. I'd be a multi-millionaire after working on Army of Darkness. The hours were so hideous.
What is good in life, Conan? Oh, the hell and lamentation of the women. Die, Ash!
That's a good one there, Bob.
Sam Raimi, where are you? Rob Tapper, more money. Send more cash.
But that was a big undertaking, just building those puppets. Then on top of that, we did all the costumes, because not all of the Army of Darkness characters were animatronics. So we sculpted skull masks and rib cages and bones, and we put those all on leotards, and then we put clothing over top of that.
You're mean. You're mean. Not like you're skiing. No, not like you're roller skating.
I knew Greg Nicotero, Howard Berger from our days working with George Romero. Yeah, they were very generous and said, Patty, come on in. We need to make an army of Deadites and build skeletons, and then we need this witch character, and it's going to take a lot of prosthetics, so we need a willing body. And you being a stunt woman as well, you know, you can handle the confinement and the physical requirements this job is going to entail. Now, I did not know what this meant at the time.
I think it was more challenging for us to figure out how to make the animatronic skeleton do a sword fight and not fall apart, you know, just because it's getting the shit beat out of it with another sword.
They were easy, like if they broke, which they would break from time to time because Sam's very rough on the puppets. But we built it so everything was very modular and it could just all refit, like, quick, I need a new arm, and click, 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 it all kind of fit together like Legos. It was super, super fun to do and did some really great stuff. But God, I think my back is still hurting, and that was in 1990. But it was great, and Sam would love the fact that we could do everything with all our puppets.
The big department that I had to really kind of pay attention to was the special props. And that involved a lot of stuff from rubber shields, rubber swords. We had to make spears with rubber tips that people wouldn't get jabbed with. And within that department fell some of the work with the chainsaw that Bruce had. But one of the big props that we had to handle in the film was his mechanical hand. In the film, obviously, he's missing a hand, so he makes a mechanical hand in the blacksmith shop. And I remember meeting with Sam and talking to him about what he wanted, and of course he wanted the gauntlet look with all the little plates. And he wanted to see pistons and things moving, and of course we had to build this thing that just fit on a hand. And one of the things Sam wanted was he wanted some sort of a pump to power his hand, and he kept talking about one of these toys we had as a kid. It was called the Whammo air pump. You would pump it up and it would shoot a blast of air. So we gave Bruce this Whammo air pump, and Sam loved that part of it. And so we made all these parts, put it all together, and we ended up making a couple of the mechanical hands and a lot of rubber versions so Bruce could ride horses and do stunt work with.
The biggest issue was the book. The book is very small in the first two movies, and in our film, in Army of Darkness, the book was a big part of the film, and it needed to have the ability for Ash, for instance, he actually emerges from it in one scene. The book, just the portions of the book weren't going to work, so that had to be looked at. And Sam wanted the book to be similar, very similar to the original book, because he wanted the fans to identify with it, and he didn't want it to be too different. I remember when we were making the Book of the Dead, we had to have several versions of it. They've cut the old footage into Army of Darkness, so the books don't even match. That was a surprise to me. So we made about 5 books, one of which was this hero book that had all these elaborate illustrations in them. And that book vanished sometime early in the production, and it was never shot. So that book is not in the film at all. We had to scramble and make a new so-called hero book, but it didn't have all these elaborate pages in it. We just didn't have time to do it. So that was always very disappointing.
When we did Army of Darkness, there was literally a telephone book full of storyboards that were drawn, and every single day he'd show up on set, he'd open the storyboards, and he'd be like, we're shooting this shot today. And what always amazed me is that the storyboards matched exactly what the shot was. So he had pre-visualized the entire movie way before we ever rolled one frame of film. And I always found that really fascinating that you could go through and look at the storyboards and go, oh, this is the shot we're doing. And it was, not only was it a great guide on set, but it allowed everybody to be able to work at their highest capacity.
Can you pan a lot faster than them and get to your final position sooner? Because when you gave me the counter pan, by the time I got to the end, I ran out of horses. So you have to make this pan a little faster.
By Army of Darkness, Sam had evolved his shooting style where he just kept the camera rolling. Sam was almost like it was HD at that point. It was just digital, just let it roll. So he would throw out a whole new paragraph for me to say. So half the dailies are me going like this. Waiting for him to stop, and then I go, and then I would say my line, then he wouldn't like that, so he'd try something else. I mean, the laboratory was while the camera was rolling, which is great. It's a really exciting way to work. And he keeps the camera rolling so no one's allowed to go into his shot. You know, if you call cut, everyone comes in and everyone gets distracted, they go away, they have a cigarette. Sam's like, no way. As long as that camera's rolling, everyone has to stay focused. It was a good way to work. You never know what he's going to come up with on any given day.
I need that final spin on that last hit. Let's try that one more time. We're rolling. Pretty damn good. We're rolling.
Sam, he likes to play with you during a meeting. It's like, I've had 2 meetings with him in my life. And he came in and said, so, buddy, I'm going to tell you exactly where to put the camera, how high to put the camera, what lens to put the camera on. I'm going to tell you where to put the lights. I'm going to tell you what gels to put the lights. I'm going to tell you where I want the camera to move to. I'm going to tell you, how fast, what speed. I'm going to tell you everything to do. How do you feel about that? I said, well, you're the director, so that's good. I'll start from there. He said, huh, that wasn't the answer I was expecting. You're not going to fight me on this. No, I'm not going to fight you on it. It's like, it's my job to start wherever you stop. And he's like, oh, okay, good. I have no idea about lenses or height or any of that stuff. I was just testing you. He just wanted to see if he could push me around.
Sam's directing Bruce. Okay, buddy. Now run around. Okay. And Sam looked at us and went, watch this. I can make him do anything. All right, flap your arms like a chicken, buddy. And Bruce flapped his arms like a chicken. Now squawk like a chicken. And Bruce like, bark, 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 bark. Okay, buddy. Now run around like your foot's nailed to the floor. Run around, and Bruce would do it. And Sam just looked at us and went, it's good to be the king, buddy. And I was like, this is so true. Sam will have Bruce do anything, and Bruce will do anything Sam asks.
I remember we were shooting the sequence where Bruce is going to get the book. And the book comes to life, flies around, and hits him in the head. And I made this book on a stick, basically, with a pull cable that would make the book open and close and flap. And if you look really closely, there's a stick coming out, a little rod that we painted with black and wrapped tape on, and there's a cable on it. And in a lot of the scenes in the movie, I'm either behind Bruce, hitting him with the book, or flying past the camera. And I remember several of the shots, Sam took the mechanism, and of course he's in there whacking Bruce on the head. Anytime when Bruce is really getting hit, that's Sam doing it.
And Sam loves to torture Bruce. Like, he loves torturing him. The stuff we did was all the skeleton arms, grabbing Bruce and all that. That really hurt. Buddy, sorry, it won't happen again. And then he does it again, and again. So with Bruce just boom, 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 beating Bruce up. And I think finally Bruce went, all right, Sam, I've had enough. We've got it, pal. He's like, all right, buddy, you're a good sport, pal.
Bruce Campbell brings something that few actors will bring to a part, which is he will throw himself into the part. And by that, most people mean they'll really give it their all. But Bruce actually throws himself at the part.
He was the guy that could take the beating. Need someone to throw off a bridge. It was Bruce. But Bruce loves that because he gives it back to Sam. And you'll see it on screen sometimes where they torture each other because Sam will go, all of a sudden, hey, take that plate and break it over your head. Why don't you break about 5 of them? And then it's cut out of the movie completely. Sam just wanted to torture Bruce.
Sam threatened to have a Busby Berkeley line of skeletons dancing that I get caught up in and have to do basically like a can with a line of skeletons. And I was like, seriously, Sam, you're not serious about this. He goes, I'm dead serious. So I had to take tap dancing lessons.
For a man his age, has such little regard for his own safety to entertain an audience member. He should be given some kind of an award like the Human Acting Punishment Award for entertainment.
The conditions of working on Army of Darkness were not particularly pleasant. If you've ever been in the high desert in Southern California, in the spring and in the summer, the days are hot. And then as soon as the sun goes down, it's cold.
The first day I find myself seated in armour, there were lots and lots of pieces of aluminium armour. And it was about 110 degrees and probably about 130 in here. And I remember weighing myself at the end of the day, and that one day's filming, I'd lost 11 pounds in water, I guess. I think most actors love hot and uncomfortable, touch of self-abuse, touch of masochism, lovely.
6 weeks of nights is what we started with, which is enough to kill anybody. Our shooting schedule was 103 days.
The horrifying thing was like, you'd see that sun start to break. You're like, thank God it's almost over. And you'd look over and you saw a bunch of grips down like below at the castle, putting up a black Dubatine tent. And you're like, oh my God, Sam wants to keep shooting.
You know, it was a difficult shoot for everybody. I got married. I just got married. Like, thank God my wife is still with me.
Everyone thinks that we met on Army of Darkness, but in fact, actually we had met probably a year or so before that on a film called Mind Warp. And he was the leading actor and I was the costume designer on Lake Superior, some of the worst working conditions, a post-apocalyptic cannibalism film. And we fell in love and that's where it all began. And then we actually decided to get married before we did Army of Darkness because we felt we wouldn't make it through Army of Darkness otherwise.
We put our marriage to the worst test right away. Okay, honey, you're going to do the costume design for Army of Darkness. But wow, you know, to be thrust together working on a shoot like that was very stressful for everybody. It almost finished us.
The difference with Bruce on that picture was that he also had choreographed sword stunts to do all day long. So that is exhausting. I've done that before and it's unbelievable. It makes you have great respect for guys like Errol Flynn, who did that for a living. I don't know how you do that, but you do.
The only thing that saved me is I had no bad habits. I would go home and go to bed. You couldn't party during that movie. I defy any actor. The Army of Darkness has made me very jaded toward actors. I'm like, oh, it's cold out. Oh, you poor little thing. You know, fuck you. Army of Darkness was 6 weeks of nights, you know. If it wasn't some makeup appliance on my face, it was some other kind of rig or a shotgun or a chainsaw or something. The continuity was just ridiculous of what happens to him in this scene, in that scene. We would jump ahead and think that's what Ash would look like. But then when we shot it, that wasn't at all how it came out. So, you know, the continuity in those movies is really all over the place.
I finally had enough. I'm so exhausted. I went to Rob Tappert, who's the producer, and I said, we got to talk. Because this is day 22 without a break. And we got to talk a financial situation here. And Rob's like, all right, buddy, you know what? I'll be right back. And we're going to have a talk about this. So I'm waiting. I'm like, where the hell's Rob? And I go over to John Cameron, who's the first AD. I go, where's Rob? He goes, over there. And I just see Rob's car drive away. I went, okay, I guess we're going to go into day 23. And thanks, Rob.
This is for hard copy. Is it true that Army of Darkness is really Crime Wave 2?
Hey. No, it's
not exactly.
It's a sequel to Doing Time.
Ah! Fortunately, those words.
Time and a half. It's a Teamster story. Now, Bruce, in this scene, I want you to act very scary, but not too scary. Just the right amount, if you know what I mean. Oh, and put that special dark humor edge on it that you're so good at.
Let me try it, Sam.
All right, then.
Hey, you bony devils. Let's go.
Bigger, bigger.
Hey, you bony devils. Let's go.
Perfect. Now, can you give it to me just like that on set?
Bruce doesn't love being in makeup, but Bruce will be in makeup and go through it and be amazing.
Every day was ridiculous. Every day on the call sheet. A two-headed rig, you know, now I'm Evil Ash. So it's, you know, what you forget with the makeup and all that, it's 3 hours to put it on. It doesn't mean you go and it's off. No, it's an hour to take that shit off. Then you're working with Sam and that's a 14-hour day.
And Bruce was, you know, in the chair or in that makeup for hours and hours and hours. at a time, and would reach a point where he couldn't take it anymore.
The guy drops you off, you go, you lie down, and then someone's knocking on your door, and it's the guy picking you up in the morning. You're like, no, must be some mistake. I just put my head on the pillow here. It was probably, I would say, the most physically uncomfortable movie in the history of motion pictures. And I'm just going to say that. And any other actor can kiss my ass loud and hard. The only guy I have sympathy for is Ron Perlman.
You can give me some mouth motions. Hurry up there now! Crack that whip!
Okay, you hear that, John?
This guy can do that.
Sam's relentless enthusiasm for the material, his excitement about doing every scene, brought everybody up. It propelled everybody forward. Because making a movie is very slow and at times tedious and, yes, boring process. And Sam just cut through all of that. It was like working with a kid.
Sam, for me at the time, looked like an overgrown schoolboy. He was youthful in appearance with this irrepressible energy and this incredible imagination, which really set him apart from everyone else.
In essence, Sam is like the kid in your block who's obsessed with movies. And he'll make you promise to do things in his movies whether you want to or not. And his enthusiasm is so infectious, and his excitement and his imagination is so powerful that you just have to do it. And that's how he was like on the set.
It's incredibly exciting working with Sam because he not only knows what he wants going in, but he continues to grow that vision as you go. So a fairly simple scene can become quite complex by the time you're actually into the shooting of this scene.
He helps you access parts of your brain that other directors don't access because of the way he works, because of the way he thinks.
It was a bigger film, you know, and it was far more pressure for him than a bunch of goofballs at North Carolina running around in the swamp. A lot to contend with, more extras than he'd ever dealt with, more makeup effects than he'd ever dealt with, visual effects of the yin-yang. And he handled it great, and he always had a great sense of humor.
He was the sort of guy who would give an extra his chair. There was no delusions of grandeur or superiority. He was just a great, big, lovable kid with a hell of a mind.
I was shooting some behind the scenes of different things that we needed for our sets that we were going to be building on stage to match. And he took the camera from me and he went around and just asked different people what they thought of him as a director.
John, what's it like working on The Army of Darkness?
It's great. It's the greatest. It's been the greatest thrill of my life working with Sam Raimi, the director.
Why?
Because he's a genius.
He always kept it alive, and which is a very enjoyable thing to happen on a movie, because so many films you go through the experience and you don't remember, or you want to not remember what happened on the set because it's so difficult.
Sam's never ever lost his sense of humor and his love for movies and his thirst for teamwork. You know, that's one of the things I really like working with him, is that he wants you not to just be a vendor. He wants you to be part of the team, and he expects you to bring your skill and talent and expertise to his movie to make the best possible film you can.
You're isolated for a period of time with a crew, and you're living at the hotel and then the castle set.
I just decided to take the realistic approach, and my research was all based on reality. It basically looks like Spain, which was part of the problem because I had just come back from England and I wanted Army of Darkness to look like England, and it just couldn't do it because everything was just so drab. It is a desert.
I remember Sam coming to me. He said, well, there's been some budget considerations. Nottingwood Forest is slightly smaller. Where would you like your tree, Bill? We had one tree and one castle, and the rest of it was a flat desert. So we went out there and placed one single tree.
We built like 3 sides of this castle, like 270 degrees of this castle on the inside, a little bit on the outside up to the first story, and then the rest was matted in. It was all effects after that. But the thing stood for a while because it was a big, we're not going to take it down. It was not in our deal to take it down. They said, go ahead and leave it. They shot a few music videos there.
And then I frequented a lot of the like Renaissance fairs. They are the people who do recreations of the time period, so they were immensely helpful.
So Tippi Hedren has this reserve for big cats, lions and tigers and no bears though. And you would at night, because we'd be shooting all night, you would hear them roaring, and all night long you'd hear lions roaring and tigers roaring.
And they actually ruined a couple shots, as I recall. You know, there would be a tender moment with Ash and Sheila, and the lion roared in the background. What the hell is that?
They handled it every single night, suiting people up, and then you got to worry about like the extras running off and doing weird things and behind rocks and things that happened a lot.
We caught 2 extras having sex inside the castle. Because if you walk past those lights, it was the desert. There was nothing happening. So we found 2 guys having sex. There were just incidents with extras. At one point, I'm being marched into the castle. So I'm a prisoner, and there's an extra who's right in front of me who's not doing anything that Sam is saying. He's like, okay, you're soldiers. Let's see you. Left, right, left. You wanted to make sure that soldiers could do a cadence. These are guys they're not soldiers, they're not actors, they're not anything. They're guys with chainmail and fake beard. They don't even know why they're there. Sam finally walks away, and I said, hey, dude, do you understand what's happening here? Are you going to do what the director told you to do? He looks at me and goes, I'm not in the military. I went, yeah, but you're playing a soldier. You know why you're here. You're here, you're being paid. You got to do it. He goes, yeah, fuck this. He took his beard, he just ripped it off, he threw it in the dirt and stomped off.
There is a sequence in the movie where there's a giant geyser of blood that goes up. That, I don't think, was in the original screenplay. So all the extras are in singles of their wardrobes. And very smelly singles, by the way, because they had to wear this clothing day after day, and we didn't have the ability to wash them, because then you would have washed out all the dirt and the grime. And so we have only singles of everyone's outfits, and then Sam's like, I want the biggest geyser of blood to come spewing out of the pit. And I mean, I get the phone call and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all singles. And now everyone's gonna have pink all over them, because special effects blood doesn't actually, look like blood when it gets on clothing. It looks pink. I have to say, the gods were on our side, because the crowd pulls away and the winds are blowing the geyser of blood in the opposite direction. And I was like, oh, thank God.
And I thought, okay, here we go. We're going to clean that all up and do another take of that, which I don't think we did. I think we just let it dry in the sun. It was fine.
Every Friday, Sam and Rob, and sometimes Bruce would come to K&B and do kind of like an art review. And Sam wasn't sold on what we had done for the Pit Bitch.
That was actually played by Bill Bryan, who played this Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in Ghostbusters.
I was asked to build the suit part of the Pit Bitch. Specifically, they asked me to put on the suit just so he could see what it would look like. It was, I'd made saggy tits and, various raggedy clothing. And so that I put that on, and the head and hands, and I'm standing around waiting for Sam to come out.
Bob and I dressed Bill Bryan in the full suit, had him standing on this board like it was on a dummy, and Sam's looking at it, he's like, yeah, I don't know, pal. And then Bill just leaped out at Sam, and Sam screamed. And he went, oh my God, it's the most terrifying monster I've ever seen. It must be in the movie. It's a hideous horror hag. And that's how we sold the Pit Bitch to Sam, because he wasn't hip on it at first.
He said, oh, all right, it's in the movie and I want him in it. So I both created the character and landed the role as well. They hid me behind a wall of burlap and moss and mud. And I stood there for an hour and a half while they dressed it and lit the scene. And then finally Sam and Bill Pope, the DP, came in and they set up the camera and got Bruce in position. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it going on.
Keep that head alive and come after him. Yeah. You're a wild thing, a thing born of the fires of hell.
And my direction, when the time came, I heard, rolling, action, and come out, Monster Bill. That was my direction. And
Now! Ah! Oh, this is not a good thing! Ah!
so that was my performance.
He gets knocked back into it and he does a flip and goes back into the well. That was challenging because I had a stuntman, Dick Hancock, an ex-gymnast. And then we put him in this thing that's got, he can't see very well. He's got a funky little gut, so it's hard to tuck and do that fancy stuff. But him being a veteran, knowing this stuff, when I explained to him what we wanted to do, he said, yeah, I can pull that off. So down the pit, we put pads for him.
Movement and action!
The falling car, they actually shot the car falling out of the sky and Bruce landing next to it. They reshot it for the Army of Darkness.
An 80-ton crane or some kind of giant crane was armed out with the car over the quarry and was going to drop the car.
And I don't know what happened, it was not balanced right, but the whole thing went off and the driver jumped out of the crane and the whole thing went down the side of the mountain, or side of the quarry wall. And that was a big, like, whoa, crap, you know, it's like big insurance day.
And no one was hurt, and we actually redid the scene the exact same way with a bigger crane next time.
We ultimately were looking at it, and I think I said to Sam, I said, you know, I think the one in Evil Dead 2 is better. And he goes, yeah, let's put that in, buddy. And so we ended up, they spent all this time and energy trying to make something better when in actuality they had already perfected it, you know, 10 years prior or whatever it was.
The windmill sequence is really cool. Only about, I don't know, a small amount of it is in the finished movie. You'd have to see the uncut version to really see the windmill sequence. It's cool. That was one of the trickiest because you're seeing reflections of things and little tiny things, then the reflections come to life. Then it's all these teeny ashes doing all these horrible things. So that was the most complicated. That was probably the most storyboarded sequence because it had to be 3 tiny ashes doing this, one tiny ash doing this, and each one had to have its own special background shot that had to be done in advance. So just the scheduling of it was a nightmare.
The windmill exterior was a miniature, and it was built on stage, and we had this sky backing that was painted, and we built miniature trees and everything, and the whole thing I don't know, it didn't really fit into the movie very well, so we decided that we would take the miniature windmill and bring it out to our location, and we shot it as a foreground miniature. So when you see Ash running up to the windmill, that's an in-camera shot. It's just the windmill, which is about 3 foot, 4 foot tall, is sitting close to the camera, and Bruce Campbell is off about 100 feet, and we just blended the ground, miniature ground, to the real ground.
Klaatu, Barata.
We shot in stages in Hollywood, the Intravision stages, which was this weirdo front screen process. So that had to be stage work because of the complicated technical nature of it.
Working with Sam on Darkman, we had to create this whole incredible tower at the end and have them running around different places, and of course people are getting falling over and helicopters are going by. So we knew it was going to be a very elaborate scene and had worked out how all of this things were possible and how we could do it and make him look like he's always in this giant, huge environment.
The graveyard was mostly a miniature. We built the whole miniature graveyard and staircase and the gravestone altar, and it was all rigged so that it could explode. All the gravestones flew out of the ground. The altar area where Ash picks up the book, that was built full size, and the background was projected in miniature.
We decided to do all of the stop motion animation prior to the set shoot with Bruce. And that allowed us to shoot all of the skeleton characters and some of the other characters in the film.
As an actor, you see a camera looking at you, and you have a guy literally going 35, 36, 37. They're projecting an image onto a silver screen behind you, and you're fighting in that screen. Skeleton's over here, but you don't see it. It's projected on that screen. So 35, you have to like duck. 36, you have to turn. 37, you have to get to this mark. 38, you have to do this.
We also could, in doing that, create camera moves in the plates, so there aren't all locked off camera plates. There are actually camera moves going on, especially on the big hill. We did a big giant crane when we reveal his skeleton army. That was all a big stop motion animation shot, which actually took 36 hours straight animation, because you can't really stop once you start the animation, because there's certain smoke environments involved and lights burn out, and so you have to run straight through.
I had my nightmares with that, but Marcus finally, he had to deal with his own. He's in the full armor and everything, and he's got one sequence up on a turret.
You were just supposed to hit various fight routines, hit various points in air, and that would be punctuated with someone else coming in with a K&B, a dummy on a stick. And I remember doing this continuous whirling fight motion after suffering a dose of listeria poisoning in Las Vegas, and that was debilitating.
And I remember they tried it over and over and over, and everyone was sagging. It's the end of the day, and finally I heard over the walkie-talkie I think John Cameron clicked of like, "We got it," and the whole crew just erupted.
Because you've got an image on top of an image, which is shot, the actor and then the background footage, it's grainy. But mostly it turned out very good. And the whole thing too, since they used that, gave it kind of a charm that I don't think you get today with green screen. You know, there's an obvious filmic look to it.
Probably the most intricate design would have been the winged deadite. And that was only because it had to work two different ways.
In our design that was drawn by John Bisson, he had done this really great, beautiful piece of artwork that had two arms out front and then these great flapping sort of harpy wings. And while we were building it, we sort of looked at it. I think Bob and I were standing there one day talking about it. We're like, you know, we'll never be able to build mechanical wings for this thing because it's just too big of a deal. So what if we made fake arms, and we put fake arms inside the suit and had the actress put her arms inside the actual wings. So there are shots in the movie where the actress is actually on a wire flapping her arms in the wingsuit, and we put fake arms in the front. And it was just one of those moments where it's such a simple solution to something that could have been made very complicated, but it was just really elegant and really easy.
They're coming! The Deadites up front!
Bob and I would meet with Sam in the morning. We'd look through the boards and there'd be like a shot of Ash, you know, riding a horse through the castle, all right? And in the frame was like 4 Deadites. And I went, okay, there's 4 Deadites here. So how many do you want in that shot? How many do we have, buddy? I've got like 175. 175, please. Okay, turn to the next page. Okay, here's a shot of Ash fighting evil Sheila. In the background, there's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 Deadites. How many should we plan on? What do we have again? We've got 175. Yeah, probably should be 175, buddy. So we just planned on having everything ready every single day.
Now listen here, puppet. I want you to act very scared this scene, you get me?
Sam loves it when there's gags going on set and he gets into it and has fun with it. And he's always making voices for the puppets, you know, hey, you know, we're operating, he's throwing dialogue in their mouths, you know. It's pretty funny.
You fellas, you're doing a good job. I better watch the rear flank back here. Yeah, that's it. You fellas, good luck to you.
We had 175 Deadites every single night for like 4 or 5 months, and again 7 days a week, and then we'd have puppet gags, and you know we'd finish doing the makeups, get everybody suited up, and then we'd have to put all the puppets on, and then you're doing this, and you're trying to maintain.
Oh God, I'm tired.
Even if there was a night when we weren't there, they would cut the padlock off the trailer and go into the trailer and take the puppets out, and that was usually a big no-no.
Most of our day-to-day stuff was just running, you know, puppets. They were digging trenches for us all the time because the puppets were 4 feet above us, so we had to drop us into trenches, all the puppeteers, to be able to walk at the same height the rest of the army, the actual actors were. They had them out there digging with shovels at one point. I'm like, this is going to take forever.
There were a lot of nighttime shoots for the final battle sequence. So I actually, got on the movie as a PA for $100 a day or whatever. And I was out in Acton in the desert digging with a post hole digger digging mortar holes for the explosions. And which was strange because I knew I was like going to be editor of the movie, but everybody would say, oh, what's up? And I would say, oh yeah, I'm just kind of doing this spare time because I'm going to be cutting the movie in a couple of weeks when they finish shooting. And I think a lot of the other PAs didn't really believe it because it sounded like a weird story, but I just wanted to be involved,
I had a hand in a lot of stuff, doing a lot of pyrotechnic work, making explosives and rigging explosives. The catapults were a lot of fun. We were testing them in the parking lot at the warehouse where we were working, and we were throwing watermelons and stuff across the parking lot.
We had a lot of exploding deadites that blew up, especially when they're launching the fireballs and everything over the castle walls.
We had made 40 rigid polyfoam deadites that were all in different positions. And we would just chop them up and however explode them. And that we burned through like the first night, like 40 of them. And Sam's like, all right, buddy, well, let's do it again. I'm like, fuck, we're all out of them. And Bob and I would gather all the pieces and we'd refoam them like, okay, we got 40 more.
And then we'd blow them up again. So, nothing went to waste. We found something to piece back together every time. I wouldn't do it now as a young kid. At that time, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's stand next to an explosion.
We all had little bit parts. Fighting skeletons, we'd have our rubber skeletons, quiche, punching ourselves in the face. And on my back is a half skeleton with a knife sticking in my back. So we had made this half skeleton and this whole rig. And of course the skeleton was attached to the knife and the rig was strapped around my back. And I'm in the background flailing around and crawling on the ground.
I'm charging at the front of the thing and there's a skeleton and I wipe it out with my sword. And the funny part was I ran so hard that once I hit it, I couldn't stop myself. I had the sword, I hit it, and the sword just kept me going, So I fell right on my face. I went right out of frame into the dirt.
They completely forgot about me. So we were in the truck coming back, and suddenly somebody said, "Shit, we gotta get Ricky shot. We gotta get Ricky shot." So they pulled over to the side of the road. They put a platform which had wheels on it. They put a sawhorse on top of that. They put a horse saddle on top of that. They got me dressed. They gave me the mace. They gave me the reins. They put me on the saddle. Two guys off camera would rock the platform as if we were on a horse. And they filmed me in slow motion smashing the skull of the deadites. So that scene was shot on the side of an interstate California road.
Sam was up on a camera crane. He had a French beret on. So he had a megaphone, literally a megaphone, an amplified megaphone. So he was kind of like Cecil B. DeMille or something. And he was going, "Yes, my evil minions."
Look sharp there! Passively now!
Like, all right, you deadites. And he took on his whole other persona. Those people in the castle, you despise them. You want their blood. And he'd get up. We were all like, yeah. All these skeletons going, that's great.
Sam Raimi's the voice of the final. Now I got the Necronomicon.
I've crushed your pathetic army. Now I'll have my vengeance.
You can tell it's Sam's voice because only he could do that.
So I had to lead a charge downhill of the army of the dead, and this time we were going to take the castle, damn it. And so I was on a horse in a full rubber, KNB rubber suit. As I say, I had a sclera lens, which is basically goes over your entire eyeball. It was milky white. And then my other eye, I had an eye patch. And there was a little tiny hole in the eye patch that I could see out of. So I had no vision out of my right eye, a tiny little, pinhole out of the left eye. And I was told, okay, here's what's going to happen on action. We want you to say charge, draw your sword and start charging and gallop the horse down the hill toward the castle through a sea of Evil Dead extras. You've got the sword in one hand, so you're kind of galloping and leading the charge. And then in your right hand, we want you to hear the reins of another horse. And the other horse has a rubber skeleton in the saddle. We were given the, action cue, and I, charge! And I started galloping, towing this other horse with a rubber skeleton, and I can't see anything. And we're headed down to this field of people with, like lit torches and pikes and swords. And I remember, riding up underneath Sam, who was, loftily sitting up above us all in his camera crane. And I looked up at him and I went, I act too!
Sam wanted to shoot a sequence where Ash was cowering in a closet. He wanted to have some people looking for Ash. Where's Ash? And they open up a closet, some little girl. It's always children who find out that he's a coward. And he wanted to show Ash like cowering in a closet going, for the first time in my life, I'm afraid. We're like, Sam, come on. Sam wanted, at one point, Ash to lead with a group of children out to the front of the castle, open the gates, and all the Deadites are astounded. They're all, huh? They all look, and Ash comes out with flowers with all the children. They want it's a peace offering. And then eventually the Deadites turn, and so Ash has to run back into the castle and close the doors, and all the children are stuck on the outside of the castle. Thankfully, we talked him out of that one as well, but you can see what we're up against here.
But I remember doing the fight scenes and just watching him prep for the fight scenes and rehearsing with the stunt coordinators all the moves he had to do. And then us going in there and rigging the props and stuff on him. He was pretty intensely focused on that stuff. And I would watch him working out and everything and go, wow, he's really got to do all this stuff and then spin around and then give one of those classic lines. I'm like, how in the hell is he going to do that,
Well, the bigger the movie, the less stunt work they want you to do, as a general rule. Low-budget movies don't give a crap because they can't afford to hire a stuntman. They figure you'll just do it anyway because you're the guy who did the Evil Dead movies, and So in this case, it was a happy combination. Chris Doyle was the stunt coordinator, and he doubled me a lot.
Bruce is left-handed, by the way, too, which also is a challenge. I'm right-handed. So they're over there going up and down this castle wall with this one guy doubling Bad Ash. Sam comes over a few hours later and goes, man, Chris, can you come back over here and help me? And I go, well, what's up? And he goes, well, this guy that's supposed to be Bad Ash, it's Ash, he's nearly not selling in. Can you? And I go, oh, sure. So I jump in a costume. The worst part of that whole thing was wearing this mask that this guy had sweated in for 4 hours. I took a can of Lysol and just, and went, put it on. Then I had to learn the routine, which was a double-handed sword deal that they fixed up.
Sam wanted a Fred Astaire sequence without cuts, where he wanted us to start at the bottom of the stairs. I'm fighting monsters all the way up. Get to a landing, this happens, turn around, spin, throw a guy off, go up the second. There were 3 landings to this, and he wanted this in an elegant Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire crane shot. The whole way. And we tried this thing for, I don't know, a whole day. We couldn't get it. We just couldn't get it. And it's very disappointing to disappoint your director, who then announces to the whole crew, well, I guess that's not going to work, so we're going to break this up into 1,000 little pieces. So Sam got his retribution.
A phone call that I got in the middle of the night, Bruce had to go to the hospital because one of the pieces of armor in a fight scene, his breastplate that he's wearing, I guess that chin of his got caught on a corner and he cut his chin. Went to the hospital, and he had all the other cuts all over his face from, the continuity of the history of the Ash character. And the guy didn't know what part to stitch up. And so Bruce was like, just, stitch it up. I got to get back on set. And then makeup just covered it up and made it look like another scar. And so from that point on in the film, that becomes another scar on his face. And believe me, oh my God, to cut the leading actor's face with your costume is the worst thing that could happen to a costume designer. And my husband's face is as well.
Say hello to the 21st century. Yeah!
The Deathmobile, I thought it was a classic use of Sam's piece of crap car known as the Classic. Sam's very proprietary about that car. He's used that car in every one of his movies. Every one, and I'm talking Quick and the Dead. Where is it in Quick and the Dead? He broke it down into a wagon and covered the chassis with a wagon in Quick and the Dead. It's in Oz, the Great and Powerful. The tinkerers in their little shop had parts of the car up on the walls. I mean, Darkman hits it hanging from a helicopter. It's in Spider-Man. It's in everything. I mean, so it's got to be in Army of Darkness, obviously, because it goes back in time with him. You know, it can't just get Ash sucked back in time. The fucking car has to get sucked back with him, too. You know, of course, because Sam's like, I want that car. But I thought it was a great way to make that into a zombie-killing machine.
We hooked a motor on the front of the car, and I had to make these huge rotor blades. And in the film, it's chopping up all the deadites, and of course we had to make it safe too. So I ended up casting out of polyfoam these big, giant rotor blades. So the deal is if you got hit with it, it wouldn't kill you, and if it hit anything too hard, it might bend a little bit, which was preferable than the obvious.
The rotor blades were great, you know, and the stunt guys, they rigged them so they would just fly out of the way. It was a good sequence.
Trying to get all the extras in, much less all the stunts in and all the puppets in. I mean, coordinating that. It's crazy. It really was amazing.
So all the way through Army of Darkness, I was a little frustrated because I was a horror fan. And I wanted there to be more horror. And so I was always saying to Sam, hey man, where's the horror? And he would go, get this straight, Evil Dead was a horror movie. Evil Dead 2 is a comedy. This one's an adventure. After we had put together the first cut of the movie, I think he realized that we were a little low on the horror.
You shall die!
After we had shot the movie, there were a series of reshoots. And one of the reshoots was The Witch.
The witch scene was much more elaborate in the original draft of the script. In the original draft of the script, she gets possessed, and there's a big, huge fight scene there. It was set outside with these giant columns. And what happens is she gets possessed, she starts floating, and then she pushes one of the columns over, and the columns sort of fall over.
All of the pillars were going to come falling down and cave down all around him, and he was going to try to run from it, but no matter where he ran, the pillars were still going to fall down around him. And we actually built the miniature model. We shot most of the plates for it. We did some of the crumbling of the plates, but we couldn't really actually add the stage time that it was going to take to put Bruce into that whole scene.
Somebody takes a log and throws this log and jams it down her throat, and then her face swells up and she spits the log out again. That was like in the original draft of the script. So we had sculpted the makeup and sculpted 3 different transformation heads in different expressions, one with the cheeks puffed out and one with the jaw open so we could shove the log in it. And right when we started shooting, they cut the scene. And they were like, you know, we can't afford to do this. We're going to put our money into some other part of the movie. So we had started building all this stuff, and then that sequence went away. When they cut the movie together, they were like, well, we want that scene back, but we don't need to make it as elaborate. So let's put a version of that scene back in.
And that was shot like in a garage, like a car garage, like for 2 days. Bob Kurtzman designed and sculpted that makeup on Patty Tallman.
I did audition for Rob Tapert for The Witch. Now, even when I read the script, which was this description of this witch spewing obscenities at Bruce, you know, how am I going to audition for this? You know? So I went in, and I can't remember how we got there, but at one point I was on the floor just, yeah, you shall die. You know, he's just writhing around and just being crazy physical. And Rob was like, yeah, that's it.
This is how resourceful Sam is. Like, we're all out of money, pal, so we're gonna have to shoot in this restroom. But just imagine, it's gonna be great. It's the castle. This is where King Arthur lives, in this restroom. But so Tony Treadway, who was the production designer, built this really cool set, and we, you know, shot it. And
I'll never forget that makeup. It was the longest makeup I've ever been in. It was rather torturous. It was over 4 hours getting in, and it was 2.5 getting out of it. And then in between was a 16-hour day of shooting. It was hell. There were contact lenses for the eyes, that milky effect. And once they're in, I'm basically blind. So they would wait until we were actually shooting something to jam those things into my face. The hump was on a bodysuit that snapped at the crotch, and I couldn't manipulate that, so I just basically didn't pee for 16 hours. I had it all measured off in my head so I could do it blind. Then Bruce has that shotgun, and he shoots me about 14 times. And so setting up for that, I had squibs taped under my body on the different parts where the blasts were going to go. And again, I can't see anything, so I really am just reacting to where I feel the explosion. And by the time we got to that point, it was the end of the 16-hour day. Everybody is exhausted. Everybody's exhausted. I'm used up. I'm a bag of toys at this point. And Sam just said, okay, for the last blast, how do you want to die? And I just said, I don't know. Let's just shoot it. And so we shot it, and the only thing I could do was go, slid on my face. And he loved that too. So that was, thank you, Jesus. I was so happy that he was happy about it.
Everything on Army of Darkness was a challenge. But Bruce and I, we have a saying that if it's easy to make, meaning a film or a television show, if it's easy to make, we feel it's going to be hard to watch. But if it's hard to make, you hope that it'll be easy to watch and fun to watch.
Whenever I watch Army of Darkness, I just get exhausted. Makes me want to take a nap.
Rock Sandstorm, if anybody's interested, that was Sam's fake pseudonym. I was hired by Sam to be co-editor. He basically, after the experience he had with Darkman, where the studio sort of took over the project and he didn't really have final cut over the movie, he was really sort of on the rebound from that, and that's sort of why he did another Evil Dead movie, and really wanted to be in control of this one, especially the editing. And so we broke the movie up where he started with the second half of the movie, essentially the battle stuff. And I took the first half of the movie, which was basically everything, I think, through the cemetery when Bruce ends up unleashing the Evil Dead. You know, I don't want to complain about Sam's work cutting the battle scenes, but you know, he shot a lot of stuff for the end battle, and so there was just a lot of footage of skeletons exploding, and he really didn't have the discipline that an actual editor may have had. So when it got to his half of the movie, I think everything played a lot longer. And but you know, we had this kind of first long version of the movie, and it was really Dino De Laurentiis who sort of dictated what he thought the cuts should have been.
We're in the editing room with Dino, and he's like, let's cut these skeletons blowing up. And you go, well, okay, but they're cool, but they don't add anything to the plot. So the problem is, it was really tough to argue against editing down Army of Darkness. Because they're like, well, does that affect the plot? No, well then let's just have 2 skeletons blowing up instead of 5 skeletons blowing up. So where's the defense?
Sam and Rob and Bruce said, well, you know, we worked with Dino before. We worked with him on Evil Dead 2, and you know, he's a really great producer and he has really good ideas, but you know, he's kind of old and his memory isn't that good and he really doesn't remember. So whatever he told you to write down exactly, you don't really need to do. You know, we'll just go back and do whatever we wanted. But of course then a week later, we'd go back to Dino's and Dino would start to run the thing on his flatbed, and the guy had a memory that was as sharp as a razor. And he would just get madder and madder, and I had no idea. And in reality, it was like Sam knew that, and they were just basically like, you know, messing with me. So Dino would get to a certain point, and he would turn to me like just furious and go, "I told you, out, out, out. Why you not take notes?" And I said, okay, and sorry, Dino, I guess we missed that one. And of course, Sam and Rob and Bruce thought it was hilarious because they basically set me up.
what was fun about it is you treated it as an historical epic, so that you made references. There are monks, choirs of monks. There's little vignettes with medieval instruments. The melodic themes themselves are influenced by what we're seeing on screen because of the time frame. Battle music. You played for that whole situation. I remember recording the choir for the opening scene, and I said, think of it as we're recreating a B-movie action classic, adventure fantasy classic like Jason and the Argonauts. And one guy yells out, B-movie, that's a classic. So I knew I was in the right hands with the choir then. But that's kind of how you kind of treat it this way. You know, you kind of respect the roots of where this, the humor in the story is coming from. In the other movies, it was a little bit less so. You have a cabin, but yet you have to make it big and you have to make it scary. So the approaches could be more abstract and trying to use the conventions of an orchestra to convey that. You know, in some ways, it was a little trickier. I just had fun with it. You know, my favorite scene is the montage where Bruce summons, you know, the great power of technology to invent gunpowder. And there's this magical, mystical montage, this birth of a hero montage. It's great. It's just music.
We sort of came up with a movie that we were happy with, and it was, you know, 95 minutes or whatever. And it was something that we all felt like really good about, which was the Sam cut of the movie, the director's cut or whatever. And that's the version that was delivered to Universal. So we finished the movie, all the effects were finished, and the movie was essentially done and delivered. And at that point, it sat on the shelf for a year.
While the movie's being made, there's a dispute between Universal and Dino De Laurentiis.
He and Universal were suing each other over Hannibal Lecter. Dino had made Manhunter, the Michael Mann movie, and Universal was making Silence of the Lambs, the Jonathan Demme movie. Dino felt he owned the rights to Hannibal Lecter, so he was suing Universal, trying to stop them from releasing Silence of the Lambs. In the meantime, two movies, our movie and a movie called Cuffs, which starred Christian Slater, were both like caught in the middle of this lawsuit.
We were a little cog like spinning around like this, caught between Dino De Laurentiis, who's a big producer, and Universal, which are no slouch, you know. So there you go. I lost a year of my life. What are you going to do?
Finally, the lawsuit got resolved, and at that point, Universal got the movie, and then they started to interfere. They wanted to basically recut it. They didn't really understand it. They thought it was too long. They didn't respond to a lot of the funnier stuff. And essentially, it was the same guy, Bud Smith, the in-house editor over at Universal, who had taken over Darkman and butchered that, was in charge of, you know, the recut of Army of Darkness.
So weird things are going to happen when you really cut a movie down to its core.
The beginning of the film, Ash releases King Henry, and Henry owes him a favor. Now, in the original version of the film, there was a scene in which Ash goes out to ask Henry to come and help. For some reason, they cut that out of the first release of the film, so it doesn't make much sense because Henry just shows up out of the blue.
They changed out a couple of things, like after Bruce shoots Evil Ash, there were different lines that Sam tried.
I ain't that good.
And then in the theatrical version, it ended up with the other take.
Good. Bad. I'm the guy with the gun.
There were things like that, which was cool to me. I mean, it was cool because we, you know, basically struggled trying to figure out which line we thought was better. And so there are cool differences, you know, between the two versions that I think I'm glad are, you know, both versions survived. There's more footage in the S-Mart at the beginning of the movie. So there's a sequence between Bruce Campbell's character Ash and his boss, played by Charles Napier. So there were just funny scenes where he would like basically berate Bruce, yell at Bruce, and then Bruce would take it out on Ted, because Ted Raimi's character was this like stock boy. So little, you know, funny things like that, which I think would be great if they were put back in the movie.
It was the second time we had a movie recut by the studio. It was getting old. We were like, is this what happens? Does every studio movie get recut? And I think the answer is kind of yeah. You know, there are people who spend millions of dollars on a movie, and doggone it, they want it how they want it. So that was kind of a drag, having to deal with all that crap.
6 drops.
Well, Ash oversleeping and waking up, again, mistaking how many drops he took. This is a guy who can't remember 3 words, don't forget. Klaatu, Verada, whatever that word was.
In Sam's world of economy, we had a shriveled, mummified body at the shop. We ended up putting a long gray beard on it, filming one version where Ash didn't make it. His body's dead in the back seat. And oh well. And we shot it, and then we shot a variation on that where he made it, but he went too far and he's got the beard.
He wakes up, the world's been destroyed. I slept too long! Cuts to black. But when we previewed it, here's what kills me. You can make a movie called Army of Darkness, and the audience goes, that was a sad ending. We're like, what?
Even though it conceptually was, I think, good, just in execution it was a little lame. You know, it's like ended with that kind of cheap Intravision shot of post-apocalyptic London with the Big Ben, but it was not a really convincing or particularly dramatic shot. You know, I think it was better in its intent than its execution, so it was really hard to fight for, you know.
We thought that's perfect, because the lead-in to the next movie is Ash leads a team of robots against the Deadites. He's Omega Man. It would be fantastic. The Army of Darkness 4 would be great. Like Ash leading an uprising of robots against Deadites. We thought that was way better, but because the audience thought it was a downer ending, because again now it's a studio movie, so you're going to do previews. So at the previews they were like, oh, it was sad, bad ending. So they wanted a positive ending.
And to do that different ending, they wanted a zing zang, bing boom, blow it up that you see where they're in the S-Mart, which was actually in Malibu Lumberyard.
Lady, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store.
That was shot like Christmas Eve.
And I got a call, and I felt like when the call came, it was like, is there any actress in LA right now? And they were like, I think there's one. I saw her walking by. Let me give her a call. I think my name was like S-Mart Girl.
You know that story about how you could have been king? I think it's kind of cute.
I was such a newbie that I didn't understand the significance of how profound this was. I was just sort of really excited to be there, happy to be there. Not a lot of energy because it was night and it was like Christmas, and I was sort of like, you know, I think I hadn't eaten a solid meal at that point in so long because I had no money that it was kind of like, is there food?
I personally preferred the first grim one because the reshot sequence, the world pays off for Ash, has a happy ending. Ash gets to do the only thing that he knows how to do, fight monsters, and he gets the pretty girl. Audiences certainly preferred this. I did not, because I didn't feel that was in line with who he was.
So Ash, you know, rips his shirt off and kills the Deadite, and
Hail to the king, baby.
so that's the new ending. We're like, whatever. By that point, it didn't matter. We had had such a miserable experience with that movie. Of course they want to shoot a new ending.
In the 80s and 90s, we battled the ratings board nonstop on a million different movies. They really had a lot of power. They really held a lot of filmmakers hostage.
The first two Evil Deads, we went around the ratings board, because in America you can release a movie unrated. It's not illegal. It just means if you release it without a rating, you can't get certain newspapers won't run the ads, certain TV stations won't run it, and radio stations. So we finally came to them to get the rating for Army of Darkness, and the ratings board was like, we're going to get you guys. The fact that the movie did not get an R rating when we first submitted it cracks me up. They wanted to give it an NC-17 to Army of Darkness with talking skeletons.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
The ratings board has its head so far up its ass, it's ridiculous.
There's not really blood in the movie. I mean, I remember like having a gallon of blood on the trailer, and I'm like, I've never cracked any blood open on this movie. And it's a Sam Raimi movie. What's that about?
So we asked them, we were like, okay, so what should we cut? They go, well, it's the cumulative effect. We're like, you have to tell us what to cut. I don't know what we cut out. I think we just resubmitted it. Went, there, we cut stuff out.
Oh, the fuck out of my face.
It's kind of interesting. I don't know why the ratings board would even attack the movie, other than they were seeking vengeance from Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2.
And then that's the irony. It got an R rating, but it was specifically shot and toned down while Sam was shooting it to get a PG-13.
When my kids were young, I let them watch it, and they grew up watching Army of Darkness. I mean, just loving the movie, you know, because it had that Harryhausen feel. It had skeletons fighting, all this stuff that I grew up on loving, and there wasn't really a lot of blood in it.
I mean, I was a producer of the remake of Evil Dead. It's a really bloody movie. It's a really bloody movie. We sailed through the ratings. It's all a crock of shit. Anyway, this movie should be rated PG.
I think, in retrospect, had Sam known it was going to get an R rating anyway, he would have pushed things more. You know, he would have just gone for it.
Universal was like, we don't want to call it Evil Dead 3. They didn't want any reference to the other two movies. And we're like, why? Why wouldn't you want that? So they said, no, new name. So Army of Darkness, people didn't even know it was Evil Dead 3, and there were lots of people who liked Evil Dead 1 and 2.
When I first saw the trailers that they did for the movie, that Universal put out, and how they promoted the film, I thought, this is not going to be good. I really felt like Universal did not promote the movie properly.
I think they didn't really understand what it was they had when they were trying to market it. And that's not an unusual problem. That happens a lot.
My big issue was just the name of the movie. I thought Army of Darkness is not even a bad name. I thought the tagline was good. Trapped in time, surrounded by evil, low on gas. They said, come on in, we're going to shoot a reference shot of your face with a smarmy expression. I'm like, for what? Oh, we'll show you. So then they put it on the Frank Frazetta type poster. I've signed that poster 100 million times now. I thought the poster was good. I thought the ad campaign was fine, but nobody knew that it was connected to the other movies. And I think that would have helped.
It was too strange for mainstream audiences at that time. It was too weird and too bizarre. So I think it took a while for people to sort of figure it out.
I think it cost 13 and it made 13. You know, those are the wrong numbers. Everyone today has in their head that Army of Darkness is like a hit. It's an American movie classics. It's an American movie classic. Ben-Hur, Army of Darkness, you know? But the thing bombed when it came out. That movie took like 3 years to make, but by the time you prep it, shoot it, they get in an argument, legal troubles, you still got to work on it. I'm a producer. So my salary from that movie basically kept getting chopped into smaller and smaller pieces. It wasn't supposed to last for 3 years. It was supposed to last for like a year. And I wasn't supposed to get divorced just before the movie either. So half that movie went away, then half of that, and then half of that, then divided by 3. I think I made as much as a shoe salesman by the end of Army of Darkness.
And the winner is Sam Raimi. Thank you very much. Great honor to receive this award. The winners are Joseph DeLuca and Debbie Elson for Army of Darkness, Tony Gardner and KMB Effects for Army of Darkness,
and Beth Davis for Army of Darkness.
The winner is Bruce Campbell for Army of Darkness. I feel all warm and fuzzy, I'll tell you. Needless to say, I'm very grateful for all of you fine and wacky and unique fans for sitting through ridiculous movies like Army of Darkness. All right, relax, I'm only kidding.
It's certainly a giant cult movie. I mean, you go Army of Darkness, people are like, oh, it's one of my favorite films. I think because it's just a great film. It's a really super fun movie. Anybody can watch it.
It's pretty cool to be involved with something like Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, because they've become so classic, or and a big part of pop culture.
The truth is that on a dull day, it's nice to be remembered for something. I don't exactly have like Wedding Singer fans retweeting me or anything like that.
I remember I took my family to see my old fraternity house, and on the way in, I mentioned that I was in Ghostbusters. They said, oh, that's cool. When we were inside one of the rooms, I happened to notice an Army of Darkness poster on the wall. I said, oh yeah, and I was in that too. And they bowed down before me.
And what's amazing about it is, like a lot of
you know, classics, and it is a classic horror movie, that it just keeps rolling on and on and on.
There have been 1,000 versions of Army of Darkness on DVD and Blu-ray.
I think Army of Darkness is like Buckaroo Banzai or something. At the time you go, what the hell is this movie? But if you don't have expectations, I think it's something you can really enjoy. It's way over the top. It's one of the few horror series with a good guy who's running the show.
You're following Cool Hand Luke, which is Bruce Campbell as Ash going into this world. And I think that's what makes it so special, is it became Bruce's movie with all these other crazy characters on this fantastic world. Doesn't matter what they're going through, but once you love a character, you're gonna go on for the ride. And I think that's why Army of Darkness holds up so well, and people kind of point to it as the iconic Evil Dead movie.
Within 4 years or 5 years, Jurassic Park would come out, and The Abyss would come out, and then it was all about digital effects and not practical puppets. So Army of Darkness benefits from being one of those last movies that really embraced the technology that we had worked so hard to pioneer in the 70s and 80s.
Army of Darkness is one of my top 5 favorite movies I've ever worked on. Like, I hold that film, you know, so high, and it's the experience was amazing. What we got to build, I love. I still love everything we did in that movie. And it's a super fun film to watch.
It goes over the top, and yet it has such variety in the film that you don't see. And although there are elements of formula in it, it's not a formulaic film.
And it's because each person discovers it. Each person is respected as a viewer. And each person discovers it for themselves, that it won't go away.
By the way, Army of Darkness, I will say this, is the only studio movie I've ever starred in that was financed by a studio and released by a studio. You know, I've been in movies like Bubba Hotep. It was financed independently, wound up on MGM. But this is the first time and last time that I ever starred in a motion picture for a studio. And I'm glad to say it was Universal, because I think the fact that they made B movies, they didn't apologize for it. I still like Universal, you know, even after Army of Darkness.
I am extremely grateful to have had the opportunity to be a part of this. I mean, these are really sort of guideposts in a life of music that has sustained me, sustained my family, and just has been a great, great adventure that continues even now.
We wouldn't even listen to people for 10 years of like, shut up, you don't get it. The movie died, the series is dead. You know, this is it, we killed it. We single-handedly killed the series. People are like, no, 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 and then the DVD came out, got more popular, 87 versions of Army of Darkness. And then the questions just kept coming. When are we gonna have another one, have another one, have another one? Well, Sam has since become one of the biggest directors in Hollywood. You know, he made the Spider-Man series, for God's sake. I got on a show, Burn Notice, for 7 years. Life goes on, and you don't think about it anymore. But if you're a fan of those movies, you want what you want, and you want it when you want it. So we're like, all right, you know what? Rob Tapert's done a lot of TV, produced with Sam a lot of TV, I've done a lot of TV. Let's try TV. And came up with a notion. Sam worked with his brother Ivan, pitched the idea around, and it took. We had 3 different suitors who were willing to do this show as a series, and we picked the one stars that we felt could give us the same creative freedom we had on the first one. So we have a lot of creative freedom, and we have no content restrictions basically whatsoever. So I think finally we'll get the last laugh.
So I think the cool thing about Ash vs. Evil Dead is that he's trying to like make the horror more straightforward horror, as opposed to like kind of the more slapstick or adventure direction that he was going after in, you know, Evil Dead 2, of course, but you know, definitely Army of Darkness. So it's, yeah, there's, you know, the kind of humor and the kind of Ash being an idiot and his one-liners and his bluster and his blowhardedness, but there's still some straightforward horror stuff that I think is going to be like really pleasing to the fans.
The latest Evil Dead movie is 25 years removed for the most part, and people still won't let it go. I think it's just something about the movies, Sam Raimi's filmmaking. It's very inventive, it's very over the top. And plus I think Ash is a relatable character. You know, he's very horribly flawed. He's caused the deaths of innocent people. And I think people, again, people who think that's funny, think that's really funny. Some people don't get it. They're like, why the hell would you have an asshole as a lead character? We're like, because we think that's funny.
Groovy.